everyone, welcome to Virtual Concert Hall, live music channel. My name is Chris Au, and I have with me the wonderful Dr. Anna Ouspenskaya, and we'll be co-hosting today's show.
Thank you, Chris, and welcome everyone who is watching.
This is part 5 of the documentary of Beethoven's Symphony No. 4, written and rated by Lawrence Rapchak, created by New Media Productions Worldwide and Virtual Concert Halls. This show is also produced by Architects of Music, and we're really pleased to be able to collaborate with them. This is amazing that we're able to do this, and it's because we are just so passionate about connecting musicians and audiences from around the globe.
And we've arrived in the dominant key of B flat major. So this may be a sonata form of some sort. We'll see what happens. But we now encounter what I regard as Beethoven's most overtly romantic passage in any of his symphonies, along with the slow movement Brook scene of the Pastoral Symphony. But that work is a specifically descriptive work, whereas this new secondary theme we've just reached in the Fourth Symphony is uniquely beautiful in its sound alone, as pure music. And just as the main theme is built on a descending scale, this new theme, played by the clarinet, rises slowly and mysteriously over the warm, hushed string accompaniment. And the intensity of the string sound, which you'll hear in the recording in just a moment. It's largely due to Beethoven's use of the diminished seventh chord, which I've mentioned so often. So this is a good time to take the plunge. Okay, it's actually very simple. You take your dominant seventh chord that we've heard so often, this. It's what the Beatles do in Twist and Shout. There's your dominant seventh chord, yes? Yes. And it's a seventh chord because the distance between the bottom note and the top note is 7 notes. 1, 2, 3. Okay. And now you will lower, for the diminished chord, you will lower, you will make smaller, you will diminish the intervals between each of the notes. You keep the lowest note the same, the A is the same, but then you lower each of the other notes by a half step. So this note becomes this. This note becomes this. And the top note becomes this. The intervals between the top 3 notes are diminished by a half step to produce this familiar and very telling sound. And with Beethoven's secondary theme now, you add the tonic B flat in the bass. Wow, and you sense the magical effect that this chord produces. Now, these diminished chords have been around for ages, but they really came into their own during the new openly expressive idiom of the Romantic era. And they are mainly used in 2 ways. First, to add extra intensity to a lyrical melody, such as this tune, which we all know. There's your diminished 7th chord, and you can go the next one higher, like so. But also, as the Romantic style became more invested in literature, in fantasy and gothic, horror and legends and supernatural. Think of Mary Shelley and E.T.A. Hoffman at the same time. The diminished chord became very effective in music and eventually very overused to convey tension and fear and mystery, all sorts of creepy things, and storms and tempest. Franz Liszt would have been lost without the diminished seventh chord. Etc. And now in the slow introduction of the Beethoven Fourth Symphony, we heard this. Here, there's your diminished seventh chord. And we'll hear much more of this chord in the scherzo movement. But here, in the gorgeous secondary theme, in the second movement, the rising clarinet theme, the diminished seventh is used for maximum expressive effect, as we will hear. And it's followed by a third theme, a closing theme that starts as a simple bassoon duet, but is delicately accompanied by both the florid figure in the strings and at the same time the opening martial motive is heard very softly in the basses. So this bassoon duet theme is accompanied by both of these contrasting figures simultaneously. But let's back up now to the exquisite second theme, the clarinet rising out of the cushion of strings. And their diminished chord in the strings is ingeniously voiced by Beethoven as each string section rises in an arpeggio and then settles on one of the notes of the diminished chord, like so. It starts with the cellos. They rise in an arpeggio and they settle here, and the violas then rise in an arpeggio and they settle here. The second violins then rise and they settle here, and all of them are sustaining their notes. Then the first violin rises and settles here, hovering, sustaining. So you have this amazing stream of sound that just shimmers in the background as the clarinet emerges from it. And as the clarinet continues its melody, it's only the violins that accompany very delicately, like so. Lots of details here, I know, but bear in mind that this exquisitely wrought music has largely been ignored. The Beethoven Fourth Symphony is the least performed and least known of his 9 symphonies. So let's start with the clarinet theme now, and the diminished chord rising in the strings. Everybody knows Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata. Maybe this is Beethoven's dreamy moonlit symphony. The clarinet rises, and the strings hover in the background. Now the delicate violin accompaniment. And the accompaniment now intensifies with the diminished seventh chord. And now the closing theme, the bassoon duet. And the florid motive is in the strings, and the martial motive below in the basses. And now a big dominant seventh chord, and the martial motive with trumpets and timpani. And the martial motive in the second violins, and the welcome return of the main theme. And notice that all of these accompanying motives, they all provide a continuous sense of motion, whether it's the martial figure or the florid figure. And sometimes it's staccato, the delicate interplay of violins. They all create this underlying organic flow upon which the music seems to float. So in terms of structure, we have the descending main theme, then a move to the dominant key of B flat for the lovely secondary theme in the clarinet, the third or closing theme, the bassoon duet, And now there's a return to the main theme in the tonic key in E flat. So it's sort of like a rondo with A returning. And once again, we hear a full version of the martial motive, which always seems to intrude a bit on the serenity of the music. But this time, it will lead to this.
Love how he takes such great care and time to explain to us this diminished chord and how it's formed. Let's talk a little bit about this. This is a wonderful way of expressing what a diminished chord really means.
Yeah, this is probably the most clearest and emotionally significant way of explaining such a technical thing as how do you build the diminished seventh. Every musician has to learn that in their music theory class, and but the application of it, the process, the motion from a dominant seventh, which is full of energy moving forward, into that diminished seventh chord, which has the sense of collapsing on itself, and how that is created. This really adds not just significance, but also adds it just makes sense. It's not just okay. Let's build it note by note, and also the perception of the composers and how they use it because of its diminished and kind of inward structure of it, and how the notes together create that tension towards diminishing further. So
I also like very quickly as this then people have never changed the name of this. They keep calling it the diminished chord, and I don't know what it is in different languages, and you may correct me if I'm wrong, but I like that it retained its full name as diminished instead of something like the chord of pain or the chord of grief. Because then I know the diminished chord doesn't sound like much to someone you meet down the street, but it allows the freedom for interpretation. It allows for us to actually put in what the diminished chord really can mean.
Well, in the context of, for instance, this second movement of the symphony, the way Larry brings up that harmony, it's not technical. It's harmony is a color, and the tool, like in the painting, if you put the red color, it brings certain emotions. You put the green, brings certain emotions. In the music, same thing, especially when the painters mix the pure colors together.
Right.
And there, I think that's a really highlight in the moment, and Beethoven, of course, did it intentionally, when that diminished seventh chord is placed on top of the B flat in the bass, the foundation, which doesn't mix with that chord very well, and that creates that subtle sense of conflict, which is subtle, not like fist fight in his first or last movements of symphonies, sometimes outwardly warlike commotion in there, right? There it's that subtle conflict which also so relatable. So
it's
personal.
underlying. It's underlying, and what I really love about how he describes it is that it's not just he uses a way that gives you the image of something that is beautiful yet there's a bit of pain there, and it's hard to describe it. He's in the last episode we talked about how it's a yearning theme, and there's a lot of yearning within this, and the reason he goes into so much detail is because no one talks about this symphony enough, and no one even plays it that often. And so by talking about it, and he calls it Beethoven's dreamy moonlit symphony, which I think is quite a nice name to call it. I think it's quite nice and
very imaginative.
Exactly, and I think it all just serves this, as you said, the way that things aren't clashing. Exactly, it's not a fight, but there is sort of dissonance, and there's sort of this dichotomy where you're feeling the beauty of something, but also there's a bit of pain and maybe the past or anxiety about the future or something that you're still suffering. And I think that's the beauty of humanity, that amongst suffering there are moments of absolute beauty and delight and joy.
Yeah, and it's interesting how Larry calls it pure music.
Yeah.
Yeah, the pure music. I don't know, Chris. What's your relationship with that term? But I
Pure
kind of
music.
right. Well, is that music without words, or is it music with a, you know? But I think what Larry meant by that, the purity of the musical expression of the emotions, which just cannot be put into words, and that's why the music exists, and the pure sound expression of it, like the sound itself is so charged with the feeling associated with it. It's very rare that a composer finds that combination of notes. Basically, composers are, you know, like painters. They have notes they have to put together in a vertical or horizontal progression, and it's when that chord. And I've worked with so many composers, living composers, and it's also always that search for that pure music. They all call it pure music, where the sonority of the created musical environment speaks for itself. And that is so
Wow.
true about this particular movement. Yeah.
Interesting. I think that's quite hard. I mean, as a performer who hasn't composed very much, I think that's a very interesting term. I think that's only, I'd correct me if I'm wrong, but like a lot of composers probably use that term, but performers in general, I haven't heard them say speak to that as much. They say, "Oh, this is a moment of pure music. Let's just sort of bathe in it." Perhaps there is a something to be said about when you just let the music speak for itself and not try to do too much with it as an interpreter. I think that's what I've heard of. But yeah, I think pure music sounds to me as if it's a very aesthetic thing, a moment of aestheticism that doesn't need anything else to supplement it. But I think context still matters a lot. Like, what's the purity? You know, is it pure gold, or is it pure silver, or is it pure water? What context are we talking about? The purity would be my question. But I think I can understand what they're talking about.
Yeah, the composers have their own code language for everything.
I think so.
I got to tell you, that's a whole other world of human species. I think that's
Yeah,
who actually
yeah.
create those sounds. And yeah, it's interesting how you know, in the modern world, composers are always looking for combinations of sounds, and they think even, and they hear music a lot of times in structures, of course, but also in sonorities, and like
Right.
contemporary composers will build into ambient sounds and, you know, sounds of drops of water or you know, wind or whatever into their score, like especially film score or game score. And but that's not a new approach. It's
I see.
been out there forever. Like you know, if you have an instrument, piano or orchestra, whatever that instrument is, you combine the colors and sonorities and kind of build it in a vertical or horizontal structure to be emotionally so clear or so unclear
Right.
that no interpretation, no explanation, nothing is required for people to be able to emotionally relate in sync with that sound. And that has something to do with you know, if you hear a cannon booming, you respond with a jolt, right?
Yeah.
The sound does evoke emotions, even in this simple
I see
example.
what you mean. That it's that the the emotional or maybe even a primal response to a certain music or rhythm. Just saying that reminds me of you know, the rite of spring, and that sort of the rhythmic, the way the dissonance happens, the way it like you said, it jolts something within you that feels primal. And I love that exploration of it. I think it's very, a lot of people talk about certain frequencies being very, you know, in tune with the earth, and perhaps there's a grain of salt of truth, you know, in a lot of this kind of stuff. And who are we to judge? You know, there's so many things that are part of our biological and evolutionary being that we don't really know fully and entirely. But this is just a wonderful exploration of it, and I'm so glad we got to embark on this adventure to talk about what pure music really is.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad Lawrence Rapchak brought this up. And the second movement of this particular symphony, with all the subtleties and the conflict between different themes, which are not up in the face of the audience, they're sort of inward and hidden, but they're still there.
Yeah.
So it relates to the complexity of our emotional journey in real life and relationships with people.
Absolutely.
Very directly to me. Yeah.
And to summarize this very quickly to wrap up also, I think we are presented with an incredible second movement, an adagio that is beautiful, full of yearning and pure music, as we talked about. But one thing that he does mention a lot is that there's a accompaniment that gives constant flowing and continuous movement that throughout this whole it's not just sort of static. It continues to move on and to let us know that life does move on, and water does have to flow in order for things to keep kind of going and for sound to be there. And so I want to give a big hand to our team and a big round of applause for them putting all this and making it so easy for us to understand, because it's one thing to listen to Larry's incredible narration, but it's another to have it visually represented in such a wonderful way. And just a big hand to New Media Productions, Virtual Concert Halls, of course, and Architects of Music, and the amazing Larry Rapchak.
Yes, and I want to also invite everyone to check our other productions. If this is the first time you encounter virtual concert halls broadcasts, there's a lot more out there for everyone to explore, for every taste, from really engaging and fun and dynamic events like Call Orchestra auditions, which were just a few weeks ago, and Carnegie Hall auditions, which are coming up, where musicians from around the world are auditioning for the opportunity to perform with orchestras or on the very famous major stages. Those are really dynamic events with judges arguing with each other.
Yes,
because the
very
judges
dynamic.
are giving
Yes, oh my goodness, yes.
So
very entertaining.
Very entertaining, in addition to being purely beautiful, because artists who are performing, they're really playing gorgeous music with a lot of artistry and skill. So from those events to, all, of course, our daily live music and musicians from around the globe, that's a program which is aimed at presenting artists from all over the world, from different parts of different walks of life, as well as music organization, music publishers, managers, promoters, and people who are bringing classical music to TikTok and different platforms. And, we bring together people from all these different aspects. Those are very engaging, interesting programs if you're interested in the world of people in the classical music. And if you are interested to be part of that, we are always looking for more people to join, to enrich those programs, and of course to help you present yourself and bring your project to life, to fruition, and to people's attention.
Yeah, this is a really wonderful thing that we have in our season. That's not just performances, but we always have all these different kind of shows, interviews, and showcases. So please get in touch. And this is the wonderful part 5 of Beethoven 4th Symphony. I look forward to seeing you all next for part 6 in our Beethoven 4th documentary series. See you all next time.
Thank you all. See you soon.
No matter where you are or who you are, music connects us all. We started with a dream, but now we are paving the future. Welcome to the Sound Expressiva Global Competition. Fully virtual, yet bringing musicians closer together than ever before, now on a global scale. True live, inclusivity, diversity, connection, community, an extraordinary array of judges. Get noticed by companies all over the world. Prizes, scholarships, performance opportunities. Apply to be a part of the most exciting congregation of artists, like nothing you've ever seen before. We guarantee quality and leave no musician behind. We can't wait to hear you on the virtual stage.